Welcome back to Let's Build the Ultimate Zelda Coaster on Planet Coaster. My name is Attacking Toucans, and welcome to this special effects episode where we're going to go through, add a ton of triggers to the coaster, and start adding some special effects to really start bringing this coaster to life. But before we get into that, we got to finish the Master Sword Chamber that we started building underneath the castle. We got like the bare bones of it finished, but we got to add some details. So the first thing I did is I downloaded the images of all of the stained glass mosaics from the Master Sword Chamber in Wind Waker. At first, when I was like setting the room up, every single picture was of Darunia, and I was thinking about having every single window a picture of Darunia and just having the Darunia room. But then I was like, nah, what would Nairu do? WWND. Now, they weren't quite the right size, so I had to double them up and stack them on top of each other, but I still think they look pretty good. So I'm just trying to make this Master Sword Chamber elegant enough to where it looks believable. It's going to be hard to make this room look super nice, but I think if we add enough small details, we can make it look like a pretty believable Master Sword Chamber. Now, on a funny side note, I think since the last time I uploaded an episode of this series, they've announced 2 new Zelda games, which is kind of insane. But the 2 Zelda games are the remake of Link's Awakening, which is one of the only Zelda games I've never played. So this summer, whenever I get back home to California, I'm going to do a blind playthrough of that on my YouTube channel. And then also a spin-off of the game Crypto the Necrodancer, which is actually a game I really enjoy. I used to play it on the dance pad with my old roommate Squill. There is a new version of it by the same developers called The Cadence of Hyrule, which is a Zelda game where the dungeons are randomly generated, which I'm super excited for. I love randomly generated dungeons. I know it kind of takes away from the element of like Zelda being known for having very memorable like dungeon layouts and stuff, but as a side series, I think it's cool for them to kind of experiment with what a Zelda game can be. I think we have just like so many constraints on what certain game genres can be, and I think if we break like the mindset of what makes certain games good, they can even get better. Now, there is some situations where I think some games aren't doing the right decision, like Paper Mario, for example. I think they've taken a ton of steps in the wrong direction, but I think Zelda has been taking tons of steps in the right direction in some ways. Nintendo's always like one of those companies, though, where they seem to take like 1 or 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It'd be great if they got to a point where they just continually take steps forward and don't like take steps back anymore. It'll probably come with time. They're still a few years behind when it comes to being up to date with how innovative things are. So hopefully they'll just continue to modernize. Sometimes I wish I had the ability to go in and help them direct the next Zelda game. I mean, admittedly, I do not have the credentials to do any such thing, but as a fan of the series, I could at least give some like valid input on what I think the fan base would like to see most from their games. But I'm just a random YouTuber. Nintendo don't care about me or my opinions, nor should they. I mean, they're a company who's made millions of dollars making their own decisions. They shouldn't listen to me at all. So after deleting all of the bright lights and going through and relighting this chamber, it looks so much nicer. The lighting in this game is so imperative to making good, realistic, believable areas. So the next thing we're going to do is light Kakariko Village on fire, because the story for this coaster is that Ganondorf has attacked Kakariko Village. So later I'm going to be adding a custom model of Ganondorf floating above the village, and there's going to be these like strikes of magic that come through and strike certain areas of the roofs and light them on fire as you're going through the village. So I went through and added all of these trigger points to the coaster, and all of these points are areas that you can link pieces of scenery to do certain things whenever the train reaches that point. Each coaster allows you to have up to 50 trigger points, so if you want to make a really detailed coaster, you gotta spread them out and use them accordingly. There's some really cool things you can do with the triggers in this game. I still have barely even like dived into the effects that you're able to do with this game, but as we get further into the series, I'm gonna keep on just showing off more and more things you can do, because I didn't want to show everything that you can do too soon. I wanted the series to like build up so it continues to get better, because if I showed off every good element of the game all at once, then there wouldn't be anything to look forward to when you continue to watch the series. So using these triggers, that's how we're going to activate doors to open. That's how we're gonna make the scythes swing down at appropriate times so they don't decapitate the riders. The boss fight will also rely on the triggers as well. And the first thing I'm going to use the triggers for is to have certain lightning attacks from Ganondorf hit the top of these roofs and light them on fire as you are flying through. I'm also going to be able to trigger lighting effects and sound effects. And that's something else I did off camera, which you guys won't be able to hear it this episode because I didn't record the game audio. But in between episodes, I went through and added ambient speakers that I've hidden throughout the coaster behind like buildings and bushes and stuff that play music that is appropriate to the game. So whenever you're going through Kakariko Village right now, when I was playing the game, you can hear the Ganondorf battle music. When you go through the Lost Woods, you hear the Lost Woods music. When you go through the dungeons, you hear all the temple ambience. It's really, really cool, and I can't wait for you guys to ride the finished coaster and get the whole entire effect because it is so cool. One of the other cool things that you can barely see is I have these like floating embers. So as you're going through the village, you even see the embers from the burning buildings floating through the air, which really gives it a lifelike effect. I love some of these ambient effects. I would say this is the episode where the coaster really starts coming together because everything up until this point has looked kind of sloppy, but now that I'm putting in some of the final effects and lighting and polishing up these areas, they're starting to look much better in my opinion. And once we have all the sound effects and dialogue added to really bring it to life, I think this is going to be the type of coaster that's going to give people goosebumps when they ride it. Because I'm already, like, when I'm riding this thing and listening to the music and, like, watching the effects happen and everything, I'm, like, getting goosebumps. I'm like, I really, really wish this was a real ride. Fingers crossed that if I continue making Nintendo rides, maybe one day Senpai will notice me and allow me to help create Nintendo rides in the future. I know I don't have the best credentials, but I'm still a wee lad. Hopefully as I get older, I can continue building up my experience and impress Daddy Nintendo and have them bring me on for something. That'd be like a dream, honestly. Helping design Nintendo rides for Nintendo, like that would combine my two biggest passions. But that's like that might be dreaming a little bit too big because I don't think Nintendo would really want to work with me at all because I'm attacking toucans. Let's be real. Now I'm going to do some terrain editing. The next main thing we got to do is we have to decorate the tunnel that goes around the chain lift up into this area. Even though that's a boring part of the coaster, we still got to make sure it looks clean because it is an element of the coaster. We want everything about this coaster to be impressive. Now as you're like climbing up this chain lift, I'm going to have some voice acting in the background where Zelda's like asking you to come help out. She'll be like, oh no, Ganondorf is trying to be evil again and stuff, go save Hyrule. And so that's gonna kind of be the build up, except a lot more believable. I might even hire some voice actors to like record some believable dialogue as you climb up this chain lift. That would be kind of cool to commission voice actors for my virtual roller coaster. Man, I just hope so badly that Frontier is able to somehow integrate virtual reality into this game, so I'll be able to ride this coaster in virtual reality. I'm sure they'll add it into like Planet Coaster 2 or something. I don't know if it's possible to like integrate virtual reality into a game that wasn't meant for it, but I could imagine all you have to do is just replace the camera controls. It can't be that difficult, right? I hope not, because I would really love for that to happen and be a reality. Now the next thing we're going to add is an effect that came in the horror pack, which I think is really cool, is storm clouds. I decided to put some storm cloud effects above Kakariko Village so it seems like you're going through here on a stormy night as well, to really give that ambient effect. I don't know if these type of clouds exist in real life. I know that you can use dry ice and put like clouds on the floor, but to have clouds floating up in the air like this as an ambient effect, not entirely sure, but regardless of whether it exists or not, it exists in this game and we're going to use it as a tool. As I'm riding this, you'll notice that the coaster is still a little bit sloppy. That's one thing I still need to do, is go back through and just clean up the track. There's some elements that are still a little bit bumpy. They're not as smooth as they possibly could be. So I will eventually go and do that as well, but I wanted to finish up all the scenery first before doing so. The next thing on the agenda is to throw some vibes into this little Lost Woods section. Just a tiny little section of the coaster. You go through a tiny miniature replica of the Lost Woods before you climb up Death Mountain. That can be what that little tunnel is, as you're climbing up Death Mountain. Even though Kakariko Village isn't typically at the top of Death Mountain, in our version of Hyrule, Kakariko Village was relocated up to the top of Death Mountain. That could be canon because I'm creating this land. But I went through and just added some ambient lights, some fireflies, a little bit of fog, so the Lost Woods would have a mood to it. And what's going to happen is there's the scenery piece that actually allows you to set a time of day when a coaster hits a certain trigger point. So what I'll do is, whenever the coaster starts, I'll have a trigger hit to where it turns it to nighttime. So you'll have this dark ambience as you go through this beginning section of the castle, and right before you emerge into the outdoor section, I'll have the time of day switch to daytime again. Now realistically, I wouldn't want to have to change the time of day while you're riding the coaster, but because of some of the way the lighting effects work in this game, I'm not able to like block out the sunlight entirely with the wall pieces. So in order for us to get true darkness, we have to have night and daytime trigger points, or the alternative is to put your ride underground if you also want true darkness. Which, since the dungeon section of the coaster is all underground, we'll not have to switch the time of day a second time for that. And to kind of finish things up for now, I'm just adding some last minute lighting just to make it seem like the fire is giving off more light. That's probably one of my biggest complaints about this game, is the diffusion of the light isn't perfect. Like, you can have a really bright light in one area, but the light doesn't spread very far. The distance it spreads is pretty short, and sometimes like you'll have a really bright light and it'll be too hot on a specific spot, but then the light won't even spread too much further, and you'll just have like a really bright spot somewhere. So it'd be nice if the lighting was just a bit more diffused and would light up a larger area and have an overall larger radius. I think that'd be a bit more realistic too. Like I said, Planet Coaster 2, which is most likely going to happen, seeing the success of the first game, is they're probably gonna like change a lot of the game engine, fix the lighting, fix the path and terrain options, because like I said earlier in the series, you can only have 10 different terrain textures in your park right now. So being able to use every single type of terrain texture in one park would be an awesome update for Planet Coaster 2, and just tons of little quality of life updates to make the second game better. So now I'm rebuilding the monorail a little bit to put it further away from the coaster, because when I originally built it, the park boundaries were a bit tighter, but I went and increased those to the maximum size, which pushed the back boundary out a little bit further, so we were able to put some space between the monorail and the coaster. And now we're just going to put a lot of forest in this back section. I'm not going to build any buildings or rides in this back section apart from having the monorail run through. I think it'd be really cool just to have like a section of woods in the park, especially towards the back. So whenever you're on the monorail, you're just like, you feel like you know you're really close to the park, but at the same time it feels like you're really far away because you're isolated in this random wooded area. Although I want to fill up a lot of the space in the park, sometimes I think it looks even better to just have some empty space where it just looks like it hasn't been developed yet, and then just having trees. And it just adds, it kind of makes it feel like this park was built upon an area that used to be filled with nature. So just going through and just naturalizing this back section, making it look a bit more like a realistic woods, I think is definitely the right direction to go. I'm still trying to decide if I want to build a Bridge of Eldin over off to the side of the coaster. I really want to, just because it'd be cool to have another Zelda reference, but at the same time, I don't know if it would look better to build that. I feel like it would just like take up space for no reason. What do you guys think? If you built a Bridge of Eldin, do you think it would make it look better, or do you think that would be too much? And it's not just me being lazy, because you guys know if I thought it would look better, I would definitely build it. I have no problems building new things. I just don't know if it would look better. I think it would just look too busy, and I don't want it to look too busy, you know? Also, on a side note, to get you guys a bit hype for the future of this series, I decided that this coaster is going to end up being a two-parter, meaning that whenever you finish this coaster, I'm going to have like a little sound segment that says, "Ride Coaster 2 to get the ending of the story." But don't worry, I'm going to make a video riding this coaster before I build that one. But just to get you guys a little bit excited, pretty much what I'm going to do is on the right-hand side of the castle and the room that we built, right now there's a thrill ride that I placed as a placeholder. I'm going to replace that with the station for the next coaster, and that one is actually going to wrap around the exterior of the castle and make the castle look 10 times more epic. So that's just a little bit of news to get you even more excited about this little Zelda area. And the thing I'm building now is I am framing in the room that is going to be used as the exit segment for this first coaster. This is where you will go after you get off the ride, and there's going to be some benches, a gift shop, and also a miniature Zelda museum where there's going to be pictures from different Zelda games and some Zelda merchandise that you can buy from the gift shop. I thought it would be really cool to just add a little Zelda museum as a little touch to this ride, just because I want to throw in some more Easter eggs, and I feel like a Zelda museum would be the perfect opportunity to do that. I don't know if a Zelda museum exists in real life. If it doesn't, it totally should, because that has so much dang potential, like I couldn't even imagine. Also, for those of you watching that like watching my Zelda Let's Plays as well, on my second channel that I have now, which you can find down in the description, I've done quite a few live Let's Plays, which when I say live Let's Plays, they're Let's Plays that I record live, and I think they're really fun. I think they're a little bit better than my regular Let's Plays, just because my conversation and topics I talk about are a little bit more interesting because I have chat to bounce off of. But I did a Majora's Mask randomizer there, Ocarina of Time Multi-World, Ocarina of Time ROM hack called Empire's Adventure. So if you're interested in those kind of things from me, you can find those on my second channel. It's hard to estimate how many more episodes it's going to take to finish this. It's either going to take 1 or 2. It's probably going to take 2 because there's probably a lot more work to do that I still haven't even thought of that I'm going to notice. I'm going to say 2 more episodes. I think we got 2 more episodes to finish this coaster, and then we'll do a video where we ride the coaster, and then from there we'll start the second coaster so we can continue the story. I'm not sure if that's ever been done before, a sequel to a roller coaster, but if it hasn't, I'm about to be the first, baby. So I was able to put a few images from different Zelda games onto these walls. I put a lot more Zelda images into my media folder so I could put them into the museum, but some of them didn't load for some reason, so I'm gonna have to go find some other pictures and I'll put them in the next episode. But my vision for this little museum room is to have about 20 or so pictures from every single Zelda game that exists, just kind of show the timeline of all the Zelda games, and then maybe throw in a few Zelda models. Creating things for the Theme Maker's Toolkit is one of the things I plan to do now that I am done with Versus Expo and have a bit more time to focus on my hobby projects. So I'm going to try my best to get some Zelda models put into this museum as well as the rest of the ride as well. It shouldn't be too difficult, especially since I've taken some college classes on 3D modeling. And then polishing up the stairway and making all those walls and ceilings look nice was such a pain. I cut most of that out because it was just me fumbling with the camera so much, but trying to build in really small spaces can be very difficult sometimes. Also, this museum is a tiny bit small right now, but I can always extend it later. We definitely have the space to extend it. I just wanted to box it in first and just give us something to work with. But if you guys have any ideas for the Zelda Museum, let me know in the comments, things that you would like to see in here, because I would like to kind of deck this out and put too much work into it than I need to. It's because that's kind of the ongoing theme of this series, is to put more work into things than I actually need to. I could possibly even have the museum wrap back down around and have an exit that goes into the Master Sword Chamber. But that also might be a little bit too much. Who knows? We'll figure something out. But here we go, down the stairway out of the exit of the coaster that leads down to the museum. I had to fix one little wall piece. As you can see, fixing these wall pieces in small little areas can be a pain sometimes. But I got it done. Like I said, I still really hope they put VR in this game because it'd be so cool to be able to see this castle in virtual reality. Please, Frontier, add a virtual reality mode to this game. I don't know how hard it is, but I hope it's not too difficult because I would love that so much. The last thing that I'm going to do in this episode before we end it off is I'm going to add some lighting to the outside of this castle, because right now it's pretty dark and lighting makes things look so much cooler, especially with some of these colored can lights that we're able to point towards the castle. So I'm going to light this up. It's going to look kind of like the Disney castle, and at some point I'm going to have a fireworks show that comes out of the back of this castle, and we'll have fireworks just going crazy all over the place. This is supposed to be kind of like the Disney castle, but just 20 times cooler, and I definitely think we're on the way to that. I visited Disneyland, and this is the one in California, this summer, and honestly the Disneyland castle is a lot smaller than I remember from my childhood, because it's actually pretty tiny. It's not a huge castle. It's not anything like the actual size Disney castles. It's a small replica, which makes sense because they have a budget, but this Hyrule castle is 10 times cooler. That's for sure. Anyways, I believe we're about at the end of this episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for being patient with this series. I know it's been going on for over a year now, which is kind of insane, but that's just because, like I said, it's just my side for fun project. But we're still getting things done, and it gets cooler and cooler each episode. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one.